This week's parsha, Parsha's BO, of course, is the parsha of the Yetzias Mitzrayim. I'd like to speak about one particular verse in the parsha. Just at the beginning of Parak Yud Beis, chapter 12, we are at a juncture in the story. Paro has been warned of the final plague, and the Jews are going to be given extensive instructions for the Korban Pesach, for the offering that they're going to bring that day in preparation for the Exodus. And that command of Korban Pesach is introduced by a verse which says, "Hachodesh hazeh lochem Rosh Chodashim," that this month is for you the first of months. It is the first of the months of the year. Now, this verse is understood in two different ways. The simple meaning of the verse is that when we count months, instead of counting them from Tishrei, which is the beginning of the year, we count them from Nisan onward in order to commemorate the Exodus from Egypt. So whenever we mention a month, the number we use alludes to the fact that we're counting from Nisan, and Nisan, of course, is first and foremost because it was the month of the Yetzias Mitzrayim. So if you're in the month of Av, and you say the fifth month, you think for a moment, why is this the fifth month? Really, it's the 11th month. No, it's the fifth month because it comes from Nisan. Why do we count from Nisan? Because it's the Yetzias Mitzrayim. So any reference to a month by number reminds you of the Yetzias Mitzrayim. Now the Ramban says that we find a similar thing when it comes to the days of the week. In the Torah, the days of the week have no names. We don't call them Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. The first day of the week is Yom Rishon, which is day one. The second day is Yom Sheni, the second day. Yom Shlishi, Yom Revi'i, third day, the fourth day. Shabbos has a name. Shabbos is Shabbos. So the Ramban says it's the same thing. Because the Torah says, Zochar Sema Shabbos L'Katsha. We have to remember the Shabbos to make it holy. That means the entire week we have to remember the Shabbos. Now what does it mean, as an aside, the entire week we have to remember the Shabbos? What are we supposed to think of on Sunday, Monday, Tuesday? So the Gemara gives one illustration. So let's say you're in the market, and you see something which is really, really good to eat. So buy it for Shabbos. Even if it's a Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, put it aside for Shabbos. Don't wait until Friday to shop for Shabbos. The entire week, it should be top of your mind that if you happen to see something, of course, obviously not something that will keep, but buy it for Shabbos. And there are Jews who the entire week think of Shabbos. I remember, I knew a fellow. It's an interesting story. He was a Baal Tshuva. He had come to Jewish practice in his middle years. And he visited New York, Brooklyn, for the first time in his life. And something happened which made a tremendous impression. It was the kind of thing that, if it would have happened to me, I wouldn't even noticed it. But it made a tremendous impression on him. He bought a suit in New York. And he bought the suit. It was like a Thursday. And he bought the suit, and he had to have alterations done. So the fellow in the store said to him, "Do you need it for this Shabbos? Or will it be good enough for the next Shabbos?" So he didn't need it. So he said, "It will be good enough for the next Shabbos." This made a tremendous impression on him. Why? So he says, it didn't dawn on him that I was buying it not for Shabbos. Of course it was for Shabbos. The question is it this Shabbos? Is it the next Shabbos? But of course it was for Shabbos. That meant this is a person who, in his own thinking, thinks that you buy something special, undoubtedly it's for Shabbos. Now again, it would have just passed over my head. But this person was so impressed by this that when he came back to California, he was telling people this story because it made such a profound impression. But a person should live for Shabbos. So if a person goes shopping and he sees a bottle of wine, for example, a nice vintage, So you shouldn't figure, okay, I'll worry about a Friday, buying for Kiddush. It's Sunday, Monday. It's not too early to start thinking about Shabbos. That's the simple pshat. The Sforno says another pshat, which I think is a very beautiful pshat and very down to earth. He says that a person should arrange his business affairs in such a way that they won't interfere with Shabbos. In other words, if you have a big deal, so the question is, when should the closing be? He says, don't schedule the closing for next Monday, which means it'll be on top of your head over the entire weekend, including Shabbos. Schedule it for this week, Friday morning, or better, Thursday afternoon. This way it won't even interfere with your Shabbos preparations. And if you schedule your business in such a way that you'll be able to sanctify Shabbos, that's a fulfillment of Zachar Summer Shabbos Lakacho. So the entire week you should think about Shabbos. So one of the ways that the Torah reminds us of this is by not giving names to the days of the week. So every day, when you refer to that day, Yom Rishon, Yom Sheni, Yom Shlishi, first day, second day, third day, and you ask yourself, third day from what? Or third day towards what? And you realize it's the third day of our count up to the following Shabbos. We don't count down to Shabbos, we count up to Shabbos. Right? Because Yom Rishon, Yom Sheni, Yom Shlishi, first day, second day, third day, we're counting up to Shabbos. Because Jews always ascend, just like Sfiras Omer. We don't count down to Shavuos, we count up to Shavuos. So we don't count down to Shabbos, we count up to Shabbos. But the entire week we're thinking about Shabbos because every reference to a day of the week really is a reference to Shabbos. So the days of the week correspond to Shabbos, and the months of the year correspond to Yetzias Mitzrayim. So every time we mention the day of the week by its number, we're meant to think of Shabbos. And whenever we mention a month of the year by its number, we're meant to think of Yetzias Mitzrayim. Now, we don't do this nowadays. We use names for the months. Nisan, Iyar, Sivan, Tammuz, Av. Where did these names come from? It's very interesting that these names are mentioned in Tanakh in the latest Svarim. In the last Svarim to be written, like Megillas Esther, which was written after the Golus Bavel, after the exile of Babylonia, we find the months are named. In fact, in Megillas Esther, it's a very interesting thing. The months are referred to by number and name. So you say, B'chodesh Rishon, B'chodesh Nisan. Right? In the first month, which is the month of Nisan. B'chodesh Hashlishi, B'chodesh Sivan. The third month, which is the month of Sivan. So it almost seems as if the Megillah was written in that transitional phase, because we are making the transition from numbers to names. So therefore, the Megillah has to refer to the months both by name and by number. For the people that are, like
Fahrenheit,
we changed to metric, from the old English measurements to metric. So there was a time that you had to make reference to both. So it's the same thing, that the Megillah has to make reference to the old system, which is numbers, and the new system, which is names. Why did it change? The Ramban brings the Yerushalmi. That the Yerushalmi says, Shemas HaChadashim Olu Imoyim MiBavel. The names of the month came from Bavel. When the Jews were in Bavel, they picked up these names. These were the names of the Babylonians. It was apparent that the Babylonians also had a lunar calendar. And these are the months they used, names they used. So we borrowed them. Why should we give up our Jewish way of using numbers, counting from Nisan, Yetzias, Mitzrayim, and replace them with Babylonian names? And these Babylonian names, by the way, are names of Babylonian deities. These are Shemas of Avodah Zarah, really. These are names of Avodah Zarah. In fact, Tammuz is explicitly mentioned in Tanakh as Noshim Avakos is a Tammuz. These are idols. So why do we use these names? So the Ramban says the reason is because this is to commemorate our Geula from Bavel. In the same way we used the numbers counting from Nisan to commemorate our Geula, our redemption from Mitzrayim, so when we were subsequently redeemed from Bavel, to commemorate the redemption from the Golus Bavel, we started using the Babylonian names of months. So whenever we refer to a month, we ask ourselves, where did this funny name come from? Sivan, Tammuz, Av. Oh yeah, these are Babylonian names, because we were once in Babylonia, and we were redeemed from there, so it is a zecher, it's a remembrance for the redemption from the Babylonian exile. This is what the Ramban says. The Ramban says that this is a fulfillment of a prophecy. There's a prophecy that the Navi says, when the Jews were in Bavel, the Navi said, the time will come that people will no longer swear by God who redeemed the Jewish people from Mitzrayim, but rather people will say, I swear by God who redeemed the Jews from the lands of the north and the other lands to which they were banished. And the question is, what does this prophecy refer to? Now the Gemara seems to say this prophecy is a reference to Yemos HaMashiach. That in the Messianic age, the miracles of the ultimate redemption will supersede the miracles of the Yetzias Mitzrayim. That's how the Gemara seems to go. But the Ramban understands that within context, it isn't a reference to Yemos HaMashiach, it's a reference to the redemption from Bavel. And the time will come that, at least in some sense, the redemption from Bavel will supersede the redemption from Egypt. Perhaps not in the magnitude of the miracles, because we don't find there were miracles when the Jews left Bavel. To the contrary, it was a very natural process. You know, the Persians overthrew the Babylonians and gave the Jews a license to return to Eretz Israel, but it was the most recent thing. The Yetzias Mitzrayim was ancient history. The Geula from Bavel was current events, and therefore, in some way, it did supersede. And therefore, they decided, instead of using the system of numbers, which is a zecher for Yetzias Mitzrayim, we use the system of Babylonian names, which will remind us of the redemption from Bavel. But as an aside, it's a very interesting thing that if this rule to count the months from Nisan is a biblical law, from the words HaChodesh Hazeh Lachem Rosh Chodashim, then how did it change? How could it change? But the laws of the Torah don't change. So there's a very fantastic issue over here. I'll mention it. We can't delve into it in great length. The Rambam holds it's one of the fundamentals of faith, actually the 10th of the 13 fundamentals, that the mitzvahs of the Torah cannot be changed even by a prophet. If a prophet would come and tell us that God said that we should change a mitzvah, drop a mitzvah, add a mitzvah, amend a mitzvah, we know that this prophet is a false prophet, because it is a fundamental of faith that the mitzvahs of the Torah cannot possibly change. That's what the Rambam says. The Sefer Ikrim, this was a Sefer written in the 1500s on the fundamentals of faith, disagrees with the Rambam and says it is possible that a Navi could change the Torah under certain circumstances. Now, keep in mind, this does not mean that anybody could change the Torah. Because it goes without saying that if I walk in one day and say, I think that the Torah is an anachronism, it belongs to a different time, different place, different set of conditions, and nowadays it doesn't work, and therefore we should change it, drop some of its provisions, amend others, that goes without saying. You can't tamper with it on your own. But the Sefer Ikrim says if there would be a revelation, that would be the equivalent of Maimer HaSinai, God could give a different Torah. The Sefer Ikrim says. One of his proofs is this Ramban. Because the Ramban says that the prophecy that the Navi gave was the justification for changing from the system of numbers to the system of names, even though it's a biblical command of HaChodesh Hazeh Lachem Rosh Chodashim. Now the truth is that the Rambam has a mountain of evidence in his favor that the Torah cannot be changed al pi Navi. And we have to understand what this Ramban is saying. But there's a very simple answer, that the command of HaChodesh Hazeh Lachem Rosh Chodashim means if you refer to months by number, then you should count from Nisan, not from Tishrei. But referring to the months by names would not be a violation of that provision. Whereas the Torah doesn't say you must refer to months by number. It says that if you refer to months by number, you should refer to Nisan as the first month. But there's no objection to names. So therefore, when they introduced the Babylonian names, it wasn't a violation of the Chedesh Zelachem Rosh Chadash. That's the simple answer. But someone pointed out, but that would mean that you would not be allowed to refer to Tishrei, for example, as the first month. So what about what we do? We write a check. It used to be in the olden days, you could write the name of the month on the check. But now, they want the numbers. Right? They have a check. You notice? It isn't just a blank line for the date.
Little boxes.
Little boxes. They want to paint by numbers. So how do you do that? If you have to refer to Nisan as the first month, how could you in January say, January 3rd, 0301, 2011. So that's not an objection either. So January isn't a month. January's not a month. A month is the period of time that goes from the Moilad Halavana, from the appearance of the new moon, to the next appearance of the new moon. That's a month. Whereas January, February, March are subdivisions of a year. They're arbitrary subdivisions. Whereas you have a 365-day solar year. The Romans decided it was a good idea to divide it into 12 months, what they called months. But their months don't correspond to what a real month is. First of all, the months have different lengths, 31 days, 30 days, 28 days. But they don't correspond to the length of a lunar month. And they don't begin with the new moon. They can begin any time during the cycle. You can have a new moon in the beginning of the month, middle of the month, end of the month. These aren't months. So therefore, in the same way that I can refer to this chair as the first chair, it isn't a violation of the rule of Achedesh Zelachem Rosh Chodashim. Nisan is the first month, but this could be the first chair. So Nisan is the first month. January can be the first whatever it is. That's not called a month. It's a different division of time. So therefore, I think there's no problem writing your checks. Keep writing your checks, hopefully to good causes, and
But if you write a check in Israel,
not to government.
in Israel they use secular months on the check.
And these are the secular months on the check. Now, you could also write, at least when I was there, I don't know, I never had a checking account in Israel, but my understanding was you could write the Jewish date in the check too.
But what if they want numbers?
But if they want numbers, probably have to write the secular one. Right? But still, it would be okay. It's not a month. Just make sure that you don't write Tishrei as number one. That would be a technical violation. Okay, this is what the Ramban says. This is the simple meaning of the verse. And in this sense, it's not surprising that it should be written in the Torah where it's written, because since this is the introduction to the mitzvah of Korban Pesach, and the entire story of the Yetzias Mitzrayim, so God is telling us at the outset that this is something that is going to be a formative experience in Jewish history, something which is going to be commemorated, and therefore God mentions this aspect of commemoration at the very beginning. Chazal have a different shot. Chazal say that this pasuk, HaChodesh Zelochem, is an allusion, it's a hint to the mitzvah of Kiddush HaChodesh. Kiddush HaChodesh is the method by which the calendar is fixed. Nowadays we have a fixed calendar, and you go to your computer, and if you want to know what day of the week is Gimel Tammuz going to fall out in 2097, the computer can figure it out. Because there's a fixed calendar, fixed rules, as to when Rosh Hashanah will be and when each day of the month will be, how it corresponds to the secular calendar. It's all fixed. But that's not how it was originally. It's not the way the Torah intended. There was a method of Kiddush al-Piriyah. That the new moon was observed by witnesses who would testify in court. The court would declare Rosh Chodesh, and every month the new month would be declared. If the witnesses didn't come, if they were delayed, if they were disqualified, then Rosh Chodesh would be pushed off for a day. Obviously, it can't be pushed off 2 days because a Jewish month can only be either 30 days or 29 days. Because the lunar cycle is 29 and a half days. But there's a Gzeras HaKosav, there's a decree of the Torah that Ein Moinim Shos L'Chadashim, that months have to have round numbers of days. We learn from a pasuk, Chaydash Yavim, pasuk says a month of days. So we learn Yomim Atamayno L'Chadashim. You count days for months. Bi'atamana Shos L'Chadashim. You don't count hours for months. So a month has to be a round number of days. Well, the lunar cycle is 29 and a half days, so a month either has to be 29 or 30. So obviously this month, let's say it's 29 days, and let's say the 29th day is a Monday. So the next month can begin on Tuesday, or if this month instead is extended to 30 days, then the next month will begin on Wednesday. It's one of the 2 days. If the witnesses testify, Rosh Chodesh could be made on Tuesday. If they don't testify, it's inevitably pushed off only to Wednesday. But this is the system. And you never knew when Rosh Chodesh was. 3 days in advance you wouldn't know. I was joking today with someone that imagine the havoc this would be with trying to make plane reservations. Now you call for a reservation, say, I'd like a flight on, Daled Cheshvan. Right? And you say, well, we don't know when Daled Cheshvan is going to be. Is that Tuesday or is that Wednesday? Because we don't know. Then you come to the airport, you come, Tuesday for your flight, they say, no, your flight's tomorrow. They made an extra day this month, so it's tomorrow. Obviously there has to be some way of working around that. But that was the system, Al-Pi Riyah, based on observation of the moon. Why did it change? Because the court, which is empowered to declare Rosh Chodesh, of course, is the Beis Din HaGadol, the Supreme Court. So when we had a Beis Din HaGadol, this was the system. When the institution of the Beis Din HaGadol lapsed, so we had to institute the calendar. Why does the calendar work? So the Ramban says, because this is the halacha l'Moshe Sinai, that when there is a Sanhedrin, you do it based on observation. When there's no Sanhedrin, you're allowed to do it al-pi cheshbon, based on the calculations of the calendar. Where is this alluded to in our verse? Because this Chodesh hazeh, this Chodesh. Now Chodesh translates as month, but the word Chodesh relates from the word Chadash, which means new. It really means the appearance of the new moon. HaChodesh hazeh, this appearance of the new moon, HaChodesh hazeh lochem Rosh Chodashim, is the beginning of months. So Chazal say that HaKadosh Baruch Hu pointed to the sliver of the new moon, and he said the appearance of this new moon marks the beginning of months. HaChodesh hazeh lochem. This appearance of the new moon is for you Rosh Chodashim, the beginning of months. This is how you determine the beginning of months. And this is the mitzvah of Kiddush HaChodesh. Now the question is this. The question is, why is that mitzvah put here? I mean, this is a mitzvah, it's an important mitzvah. But it has nothing to do with the Yetzias Mitzrayim per se. It's a procedure for declaring Rosh Chodesh. So what is the urgency that it be given now, just at this point? Again, if we go with the other interpretation, that this is a hint to the idea that when we count months, we should start from Nisan, they understand that's a commemoration of Yetzias Mitzrayim, so it makes sense to mention this before we get into the story of the Korban Pesach and the story of the Exodus itself, to point out that this is going to be remembered, commemorated, very good. But if we're talking about the procedure for declaring Rosh Chodesh, as a rule, that has only per se to do with the Yetzias Mitzrayim. So why does the Torah give this mitzvah just at this juncture? Why in Egypt? Why couldn't it wait till Har Sinai along with the rest of the Torah? So I'd like to show you two explanations. One is a very simple, short one, and one is a little bit of a more encompassing one. Rashi, in this week's parsha, says an amazing thing. The day of the Yetzias Mitzrayim the day of the Exodus, it says, "Be'etzem hayom hazeh," on this day itself, God took us out of Mitzrayim. On this day itself, which was the 15th of Nisan. So Rashi says an amazing thing. Avraham Avinu was told that he would have a child on the 15th of Nisan. The Malachim, when the Malachim visited, says Rashi, it was the 15th of Nisan. And on that day, he was told he would have a child. The child was born 1 year later on the 15th of Nisan. God told Avram that 400 years from the time that your child was born will be the Exodus from Egypt. And it was exactly 400 years later on the 15th of Nisan. And this teaches us that God does not delay. It's not approximate. It's not around that time. When God makes a promise, it is exact. When the Malachim said, you'll have a child 1 year from now, it was 1 year to the day. And when God said, the Yeshiva Messiah will be 400 years from now, from the time you have a child, it will be 400 years exactly from the time you have a child. And for good measure, Rashi also says that the bris bein habesarim, the covenant that God made with Avram, also was on the 15th of Nisan. For good measure. Well, what makes it the 15th of Nisan? There's no reality to the calendar. The dates are fixed by the Kiddush of Bezdin. In other words, when Rashi says that the Malachim came on the 15th of Nisan, and Yitzchak was born on the 15th of Nisan, and the bris bein habesarim was on the 15th of Nisan, that means if there would have been a Bezdin functioning, that would have been the 15th of Nisan. Was it really the 15th of Nisan? No, it really wasn't. There was no Bezdin. There was no calendar. But there was a divine promise that the redemption will take place on the 15th of Nisan. So therefore, the 15th of Nisan had to be established in order to be kevei, in order to set the date for the Exodus. So therefore, HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave Moshe Rabbeinu the procedure for establishing the date, so that by Moshe and Aaron functioning as a Bezdin and being Makadosh T'chayir, sanctifying the new moon, that made the 15th of Nisan into the 15th of Nisan, and thus the day of the fulfillment of the divine promise. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been the 15th of Nisan.
They were given this on the 1st of Nisan.
It was the 1st of Nisan, right? So let's say, for example, it was a Thursday. So on Thursday, they sanctified the new month. So 2 Thursdays later, it was the 15th of Nisan. But it wouldn't have been the 15th of Nisan otherwise.
But they became the base then at that point.
They were the Bezdin.
How did they get
Rosh and Aaron. The Gemara says, in many places, the Gemara says, Moshe Makom Shivim V'Yachad Kai. The Moshe himself had the status of a Bezdin of 70. Because you see that in Parshas Baloscha, only when Moshe Rabbeinu said he can't do it all himself, the HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, okay, take 70 people. Because Moshe himself was Makom Shivim V'Yachad Kai. He himself was the equivalent of a Bezdin of 70. 71.
Were there witnesses for the first one?
No, the Bezdin itself witnessed it. Moshe and Aaron saw it. That would be good enough, right? If the Bezdin itself would observe the new moon, they could sanctify on that basis.
They could.
Sure.
They didn't need independent witnesses?
No, you don't need independent witnesses. The Gemara says that if the Bezdin itself saw the moon, lo teish miyagadol Maria, the Gemara says, hearing a report from witnesses can't be better than seeing it yourself. Right? Can't be a halacha. If you hear from witnesses, that's good enough. But if you see it yourself, you can't. Right? Lo teish miyagadol Maria. So certainly if the Bezdin would see it, they could. Moshe not function as the Bezdin. But that's the simple answer. But I think that there's another issue over here, a very, very, very important issue that we have to understand. Let's talk a little bit about the names of the days of the week and the names of the days of the month. Now, talk about days of the week first. Now, this is a very interesting thing. The week does not seem to be a natural cycle that we can observe. Because a year is a natural cycle. What is the natural cycle of a year? What does a year mean? What is the definition of a year? So everyone is going to say, oh, that's the amount of time it takes the Earth to orbit the Sun. Don't say that. Because it's only modern, after Copernicus, people knew that the Earth orbits the Sun. What did they think a year was before Copernicus? The cycle of the Sun orbits the Earth. No. A year is the interval from solstice to solstice. In other words, there's a pattern of days getting shorter until the winter solstice, then longer until the summer solstice, then shorter until the next winter solstice. Right? When the entire cycle comes back to the starting point, that's a year. Therefore, it really makes no difference whether the sun goes around the earth, earth goes around the sun, whether you know that, whether you don't know that. A year is an observable pattern. From solstice to solstice, right? Okay. A month, a real month, a lunar month, is an observable pattern. The interval from new moon to new moon. What's a week? What's a week? Where does a week come from?
Shabbos.
Shabbos to Shabbos. It's a commandment.
That's if you're a Jew and you have a Torah. And what if you don't have a Torah? So it seems that observing a week seems to be a very widely held practice, not only Jews. The Kuzari, Rabbi Breitowitz says that the fact that week is a universally held interval points to the fact that we all come from a common ancestor, Adam Rishon, who knew of Shabbos. The Kuzari said this is a proof. This is a proof that the Torah must be accurate. Because otherwise, how could so many different societies each have a concept of the week? Where would they have gotten it from? It must be that humanity is a common root. That's fantastic. But there have been books that have been written to try to answer this question, where a week comes from. And the most reasonable conjecture, putting aside Rabbi Breitowitz' shot, is that the 7 days of the week correspond to the 7 moving celestial bodies. Because from Earth, right, the stars appear to be fixed. Their motion is very slow. And there's motion, but it's over the course of a year. But there are 7 bodies that move relative to the fixed stars. And those are Sun, Moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. The other planets are too small to see. Uranus, Neptune, Pluto. And we won't get into the politics of Pluto. That's out of the scope of our discussion tonight, whether Pluto is a planet, isn't a planet. But these are the 7 bodies that are visible to the naked eye from Earth. Right? Sun, Moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. In Hebrew, they're called the Shiva Kochvei Leches, the 7 moving stars. So the theory was that each of these bodies has dominion over a day, and since there are 7 of them, it takes 7 days to go through the cycle, and then you start from scratch. Now that's why, for example, we have Sunday, which is the sun's day, Monday, which is the moon's day, right? Saturday, right, which is Saturn's day, and the other days refer to the Norse gods, which correspond to the other planets. But the point is that that really, if we were a little more scrupulous, we would never talk about Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Wednesday is Woden's day. Woden, right, corresponds to Jupiter. He was the head of the pantheon of the Norse gods, which is the equivalent of Jupiter of the Roman gods. We never would know. Thursday is Thor's Day. All I remember about Thor from the comic book is he had the hammer. That I remember. But Frigga, Friday is Frigga's day. Frigga is the wife of Woden, right? Corresponding to Hera, or the Greek goddesses, etc. Whatever it was, these are shameless Avodah Zarah these days, right? It's just that we're so far removed from Avodah Zarah that we'll call it Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. We don't have any association with that anymore. These are shameless Avodah Zarah. The Torah, right, by using numbers for the days, it's not only, as the Ramban says, a zecher for Shabbos, an allusion to Shabbos. It's also coming to uproot the alternative. The alternative is that we should relate the days of the week to the Shiva Koich Ve'Leches, which is what every society did. Every society that has a week, because the days correspond to the 7 planets, the 7 moving bodies. Correct? And what is the idea of relating the days of the week to the 7 planets? Because these planets weren't just considered celestial bodies; they were considered deities. So the Torah is not just coming to talk about the importance of Shabbos, that we should think of Shabbos the entire week. It's coming to uproot the alternative. It says we don't give the days of the week names. If we give them names, those names would correspond to the 7 celestial bodies. It says we don't believe that those celestial bodies are worth naming after. So we believe there's a Shabbos, and therefore everything else is just a number in relation to Shabbos. I think that if we take this conjecture a step further, we can say the same thing. That the shemus of the Chadoshim that the Avodah Zarah use undoubtedly relate to the signs of the zodiac. Right? There are 12 constellations. There's a constellation for each month. These constellations were perceived as deities, and therefore the alternative to our system of using numbers is to assume that each month is under the shlita, under the dominion of a certain deity, a certain constellation, and therefore this is this month or this month. The names we use. Nisan is Aries, the ram.
But didn't these constellations have that appearance?
Did the constellation have that appearance?
Yeah.
Well, let's do it this way. Not to me. When I look up, and I have a brother-in-law who's I don't want to call him an amateur astronomer. He really is pretty good. When he goes to the observatory, he's really a thorn in the side of the lecturer. Points out all the mistakes. But I'll go out with him and I'll say, look, don't you see? There's the Big Dipper and the Little Dipper. I said, I don't see anything. I just see the Z stars. I don't see the constellations. I don't see those lines connecting them. But they believe, Aries the ram, and this is ER is Taurus the bull, and Sivan is Gemini the twins, and so on and so forth. And these constellations were deified. So the Torah tells us, no, we don't go with that system at all. We're not going to name the months. It says we're going to number the months. And we're going to number the months in relation to Nisan, right? Nisan is the month of Yetzias Mitzrayim. So let's take this to another level of depth. And let's talk a little bit about the Makas Bechoros, this week's parsha. There's an amazing thing about the Makas Bechoros that really requires understanding. There are so many mitzvahs in the Torah that relate to the idea of Bechor, firstborn animals, firstborn people. And the Torah says that God sanctified all the firstborns when he killed the firstborn Egyptians, and he spared the firstborn Jews, So as a consequence, firstborns become sanctified. So firstborn kosher animals have to go to sacrifices in the temple. Firstborn donkeys have to be redeemed. Firstborn children have to be redeemed. There are many mitzvahs that relate to that idea of Bukhar. At first glance, it's hard to understand. Like, what is the big deal? So the Jews were spared from the Makas Bukharas. They were spared from the first 9 plagues as well. No, I should modify that. According to most Rishonim, they were spared from the first 9 plagues as well. There is the Shita of Ibn Ezra, believe it or not, that the Jews did suffer from the first 3 plagues. Don't Sfardei Akinam, Jews also were victimized. But if the first plague, where the Torah explicitly says that Jews were not affected, was the Mak of Oroi, the 4th plague of wild animals. Until then, there's no mention of it. So Ibn Ezra says the Jews also suffered the first few plagues. The Ramban says no. The Ramban says it goes without saying that the Jews didn't suffer any of the plagues. The reason the Torah only makes the point in the 4th plague, because the first 3 plagues were plagues which are by their nature static. They are limited to one place. So therefore that they didn't spread into the Jewish neighborhoods isn't amazing. But Aroi, which is a swarm of wild animals tend to travel. So they wouldn't stop short just at the border of the Jewish neighborhood and the Egyptian neighborhood. So therefore this was a special miracle, which makes a point of it. But I think, putting that Ibn Ezra aside, the consensus of most commentaries is that the Jews were spared from all the plagues. So what is the big deal that they were spared from the 10th? And more than that, the Torah says there have to be special precautions. They had to take blood from the Korban Pesach, put it on the doorposts. God should pass over their houses, otherwise they would have been victims too. It wasn't necessary for the other plagues. But what was special about the Makas B'choros that it was necessary to take precautions, and even with all the precautions, it seems that the Jews were only spared by the skin of their teeth. Therefore they have to be eternally grateful, and they have to have mitzvahs to commemorate this great miracle that the firstborn were spared. And if you are a Bukhar yourself, then really you're supposed to fast Erev Pesach. And we only get around it, you go to a siyum, you eat from a Sudas mitzvah. But for the firstborn, there's a commemoration even today. But what's the point? What's the idea? What was the unique danger? The Abarbanel gives an explanation, but the explanation is very unsatisfying to our modern ears. And the Abarbanel says like this. The Abarbanel says that we know there is a truth through the power of the constellations. That God conducts the world through the constellations. Do you know that? I don't know that, but there are people who believe that. That God runs the world through the constellations. And the constellation of the month of Nisan is the Mazel Tle, the Mazel of the sheep. And that's, of course, Aries the ram, that we know from the horoscope of the newspaper. But this is the Mazel of the month of Nisan. This was considered the Bukhar, the first of the Mazalis. And all Bukharim, all firstborns, derived their special strength from this Mazel Tle. This is what the Abarbanel says. And this Makkah, says the Abarbanel, was different than every other Makkah. Every other Makkah, God sent wild animals. Here's the wild animals. Here's the frogs. Here's the lice. But here, what God did was, He cut off the influence, He cut off the power of the Mazel Tle. And when He cut off the power of the Mazel Tle, really, since all the Bukharim derive their power from the Mazel Tle, all the Bukharim should have died, and it really should have made no difference whether they were Jews or non-Jews. You see, if God sends a plague, if He sends locusts, if He sends wild animals, He sends frogs, so they go where they're sent. So if they're sent to the Jewish neighborhoods, they'll go to the Jewish neighborhoods. Sent to the Gentile neighborhoods, the Gentile neighborhoods. So with the other plagues, God sent them to the Egyptians, not to the Jews. That's why the Jews were unaffected. But here, the mechanism by which the plague was brought about is that God cut off the power of the Mazel Tle, of Aries the ram, which is the root of the power of all the Bukharim, So therefore all the Becharim should have died. So the fact that the Jews were saved was a miracle. Now this is a very elegant interpretation if you believe its basic premise. It doesn't seem, I don't know, maybe you believe it, I don't believe in it. But let me put it in a different way that maybe will bring it down to earth. The Chaylas Levavos says an amazing principle. The Chaylas was talking about bitachon, about faith in God. And he says like this, he says that if you put your trust in something, if you rely on something, mida keneged mida, measure for measure, God makes you reliant on that thing. In other words, if you put your faith in money, God says, okay, so be it. You'll be reliant on your money. All you'll have is money. And if you find yourself in a situation where money won't help, that's the way it goes. Because you chose to place your trust in money. If you choose to place your trust in physical strength, then it's the same thing. You may find yourself in a situation where physical strength isn't going to help you. And God says, well, you're on your own. You chose to rely on physical strength. If you choose to rely on human intelligence, and you find yourself in a situation where human intelligence isn't enough, so be it. You chose that. That's why a person should put his faith and trust in God. Because whatever problem comes up, God can take care of that. But when you put your trust in something other than God, then you are in the hands of that thing, so to speak. Whether it's your physical strength, or whether it's your money, or whether it's your intelligence, you are in the hands of that thing, and thus you are limited by the limits of that thing. If that thing can help you, it'll be okay. If that thing can't help you, then it won't be okay. But this is measure for measure. This is how God runs the world. You are in the hands of the thing that you put your trust in. So now we can take the interpretation of the Rabbanel and understand it on our rational level. But let me just give you another illustration for this, and this principle, and you'll see it. I want to say from Rabbi Victor Miller like this, that people used to do all sorts of medical treatments that we know today are quackery. They use leeches and all sorts of things for all sorts of conditions. I mean, how did it ever go off the ground? I mean, these things should never have worked. So how were they practiced for so many hundreds of years? So Rabbi Victor Miller once said, once upon a time they did work. They worked. Because it's like this, that let's say, for example, the person put his trust in leeches. So, and it wasn't his time to die. So he recovered. People thought it was leeches. Only later on, when people began to study the science behind it, and they said, this makes no sense. Leeches can't cure you. That's when they stopped working. It never really worked. It never really worked. There was a time that people got better, not because the leeches worked, but because it was min hashamayim, they should get better. But if a person would use leeches nowadays, he would die. Why? Because you put your trust in something that can't work, and you know it can't work, then you should have known better. Now, getting back to our point, the Egyptians had a system. They believed that the constellations had power, especially the Masal Kleh gave power to the firstborn. So God says, okay, so be it. I'm going to send a plague to the firstborn. If your system is correct, then the Masal should certainly protect you. Right? If the Masal doesn't protect you, that's because the Masal really is powerless. In other words, if you're relying on the Mazel Kleh, that's it, then you're in the hands of the Mazel Kleh. If the Mazel Kleh is helpless, then no doubt. Now, of course, the Mazel Kleh is worthless, it's meaningless, doesn't help at all. But that's exactly why they're going to die. They're going to die because they put their trust in the Mazel Kleh instead of putting their trust in something that could work. Maybe if they would have had penicillin, I don't know what Makas B'chayres was. Maybe it was something which was easily treated with modern drugs, which they didn't have. But they were counting on the Mazel Kleh to protect them and help them. So, okay, fine. You want to trust the Mazel Kleh, trust the Mazel Kleh. But the Mazel Kleh doesn't work. So therefore, you'll die. The Jews also trusted in the Mazel Kleh. Or at least many Jews did. So God said, as a precondition for the Yetzias Mitzrayim, you have to show that you reject the power of Mazel Kleh. That's the idea of Korban Pesach. You should take its symbol, take the ram, slaughter it, barbecue it, eat it, and that shows you reject it. And that you're not placing your trust in it, but rather you're placing your trust in God, and therefore you'll survive. But the question is, maybe it's too little too late. Maybe it's too little too late. You're talking about people who for years and years and years and years are placing their trust in the Mazel Kleh. So just because one day they decide to barbecue it, that means they've totally uprooted the belief in the Mazel Kleh. So therefore God says it was really a miracle. It was a miracle that every last Jew was spared. Some of them were only spared out of mercy. Because really, you can't say that even with the Korban Pesach, that it was a total repudiation of the Mazel Kleh. And therefore, it's a miracle that has to be commemorated, and we have mitzvahs to commemorate it, and so on and so forth. I think this is a reasonable explanation of the Makas B'chayres. But now we understand what's going on over here. What's going on over here is this, is that the belief system of Mitzrayim is rooted in the power of the Mazolis, the power of the zodiac signs, the power of the constellations. Our belief is rooted in trust in God, in the one God, the only God. The issue is over months. The issue is over months. Now, to the ancient Egyptians, undoubtedly, right, each month probably corresponded to a sign of the zodiac, as we said. Nisan corresponded to the Tleh, and Iyar corresponded to the bull, and Sivan corresponded to the twins, or whatever. And, now they had a system that was totally built on an understanding of the influences on each month, and who is empowered, who is not empowered. What God tells Moshe Rabbeinu is that months are human constructs. A month is something that human beings impose on undivided time. HaChodesh Hazeh Lochem. As human beings fix the calendar. That's what makes a month a month. It was not because during this period of time the ram is in charge, and during this period of time the bull is in charge, and during this period of time the twins are in charge. Time would be undivided except for the fact that man imposes divisions on time. That's the mitzvah of Kiddush HaChodesh. The mitzvah of Kiddush HaChodesh is that man, through his declaration, creates months. The mitzvah of Kiddush HaChodesh is the repudiation of the system of Mitzrayim. By saying that it's human beings that create months. If not for human beings, there would be no such thing as months. It's only the human being who creates the month by sanctifying the month, by saying this is the new month based on observation of the moon. So when it's a month is a human creation, not a divine creation. As opposed to the days of the week. The days of the week, the Gemara says, those are Kadosh. Shabbos is Kadosh on its own. Hashem is directed Mekadosh HaShabbos. The months, God is Mekadosh Yisrael, who is Mekadosh the Rosh HaKadoshim. Mekadosh Yisrael Rosh HaKadoshim. If there was no Yisrael, There'd be no months. There'd be undivided time. The division of months we create. It's not a creation of the fact that different deities, different constellations have dominion for different periods of time. So the mitzvah of Kiddush HaChodesh is actually the rejection of the value system of Mitzrayim. That's why it's here. In other words, thematically, it is really part of the mitzvah of Korban Pesach. Just like Korban Pesach is the rejection of the Mazel Tleh, Kiddush HaChodesh is the rejection of the entire system of Mazalos. Because Korban Pesach is the rejection of the power of this particular sign of the zodiac, this particular deity. But Kiddush HaChodesh is the rejection of the entire system. Right? The months are human creations. We impose divisions on the undivided time, not that these divisions are created because of the dominion of the various signs of the zodiac. And therefore it belongs right over here. Because what this parsha is about is the parsha of, so to speak, taking the Mitzrayim out of us. You know, it's one thing to take us out of Mitzrayim. We've got to take the Mitzrayim out of the Jews, which is a lot harder. And the mitzvah of Kiddush HaChodesh and the mitzvah of Korban Pesach are related to that. And it's uprooting every last Egyptian way of thinking in order that we be able to think as Jews, act as Jews, and this, of course, is a necessary prerequisite to the actual redemption. Okay.